Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to be joined by Professor David Eaves, one of the co-authors of a very timely and thought-provoking paper on how artificial intelligence and digital public infrastructure can work together to unlock the real public value. David, great to have you here. Let's start with the basics. Your paper made a very clear distinction between AI and DPI. They are so closely related, but actually their functions and how they operate, how they benefit the public are quite different. So why is it so important to understand this as a distinct but complementary systems?
Yeah, I think one thing we just have to be cognizant of is, you and I spend a lot of time thinking about technology and its potential to create public value. But many policy leaders do not. They're moving from file to file, from issue to issue. And so they may not even actually understand that DPI and AI are different things at all. They're just acronyms for them of many things they're dealing with. So I think it's really important that we have very clear and simple ways of kind of trying to define these issues so that politicians and policymakers can immediately understand them. And begin to understand the consequences of the choices around using and adopting them. And so one thing with AI, one thing that makes DPI and AI similar is that they're both going to be, or they it seems certainly like they're both becoming inputs into systems that create public value. So they're actually both kind of key inputs for creating value. And they may not, and inputs might be early in the process that then lead to an outcome. But they are different. And so one thing, about AI is very clearly a general purpose technology, kind of like electricity. Like it could be used in any number of systems, kind of all across industry and government. Whereas DPI has kind of a slightly narrower in focus. It's a set of discrete systems that can be used in lots and lots of different places, but are kind of like it's clear that they have more specific use cases that have become defined over time. And so just recognizing that difference, one thing I find kind of interesting is with DPI, you can actually kind of regulate the specific implementation. Whereas with AI, I kind of think of it like electricity. You don't we don't regulate electricity at the terms of every single use case it possibly has. We regulate how it's generated, but we allow different agencies to regulate, the implications of electricity for like vacuum cleaners versus air conditioners. We don't have a general rule of regulation for all of those things.
Yeah, great. I think that really clarifies some of the confusion we might have had so far. So, yeah, thanks a lot for making that clear distinction, but really complementary nature of both topics. And you really also highlighted some fascinating examples in the paper. Could you walk us through maybe your favorite example specifically where AI is already enhancing DPI, or while DPI also powers AI in practice?
Yeah, I do. I do really love the India Bishini example, just because it's such an effort to increase inclusion. And so here, this story is really about creating, using AI systems to create translation services for. It's sometimes hard to say this because the scales in India are always so amazing, but for kind of more niche languages that have been ignored by the private sector because the market was not deemed to be large enough. Yet these people, it's desperately important that they have access to all of the materials that the government would have, so they can have good access to public services. So the Indian government is working on using AI to create translation services so they can translate government services into a broader range of languages. And this is really, you can almost think of it as like last mile, like enabling connectivity in the last mile, not through technology, but through language. And this, of course, makes DPI stronger because if you think that your DPI systems are underlying your public services, so you want to be able to authenticate people or you want to initial payments, if all that's happening in a language that you don't speak, then it's the opportunity for abuse or the opportunity of just not having access at all is very real. And so this is a nice way of it enabling that access.
Yeah, absolutely. And that example also resonate with me personally and also must be with all the audience in the room today. I mean, whenever we conduct research and, operate kind of implement project in East African countries, for example, oftentimes English is a minor language and I'm the only one speaking English. All the data coming through, all the stakeholders that we are meeting with, this is a little bit different, like local language, sometimes very strong dialect. So yeah, I mean that example is really good use case and inspiring use case also for the audience today. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it's a kind of really main story of your paper is this really compelling argument that DPI isn't just a beneficiary of AI, it's also much of the builder for better AI. So can you unpack that idea for us a little bit? I think that really touches on the very important topic that we wanted to discuss and develop for next 2 days.
Yeah, I think this is such an important topic. I've been in conversation with a number of governments around the world, and there are several governments that are very enthusiastic about using AI, and I sometimes worry that they kind of want to go get the Ferrari, but they haven't actually built the underlying road yet. And so, the potential for AI is very real, and I encourage people to be exploring and thinking about that. But there is a whole bunch of things that you need to have in place. And one of the key things you really want to be thinking about is what is the quality and the accessibility to your data? And the AI systems are limited. They're only as good as the underlying data enables them to be. And so if your underlying data is biased or limited or simply not accessible, the possibilities of your AI systems are now then deeply, deeply constrained. And I think one of the real opportunities for DPI is it can create kind of standardized ways by which systems can access data at national scale or a population scale. And so if you start to get that right, several things start to happen. One is it becomes easier for you to scale AI systems. I think that's a very nice benefit. But we also hypothesize it might be easier for you to also to assess the inclusivity of those systems. So, for example, if you have, say, a unique identifier for people, you could start running tests where you could start seeing, okay, well, what does the AI provide as a response for citizen A versus citizen B? And you could even begin to target kind of citizens who have traditionally sat at the margins, and you could run tests against those specific citizens and be like, is it treating them in an equitable and fair manner? Whereas if you don't have your DPI in place, it might be much harder to run those tests.
Okay, thank you, David. Of course, none of this is easy. What are the biggest risks or challenges that you see in integrating AI and DPI, especially in resource-constrained environment like the Kenya or East African countries that where we are today?
Okay, so one thing, and this actually relates to a different paper that I just wrote, is I do think one risk is people become kind of technology obsessed and they're just interested in doing AI to say they've done AI. And I think it's so important that we first always are connected to a use case that creates real value for people. Because if you get disconnected from that, it doesn't matter what you do or how great it is, it will not attract the attention of citizens. It will not be perceived as being helpful. And you'll have a possibly, hopefully a cheap, possibly an expensive experiment that actually damages future efforts for use technology because people they'll look at that effort and they say, well, you didn't create value for us. You spent all this time and energy and didn't do anything. We don't give you the social license to do the next thing. And so the first thing is you've always got to be connected to the people you're trying to serve, and you've got to be ground truthing the work that you're doing. This is not an AI specific piece of feedback I'm giving. It's very, very general, but it bears being repeated every single time because that disconnect is so easy to happen, especially when you're dealing with kind of a newer technology or a technology that's newer to government. Um, I think the key thing though is a key risk that I think everybody's always worried about, and I'm always worried about as well, is just kind of the potential for bias. So any AI system is really only good as the quality of the data that it's drawing from to be making its inferences or its decisions. And if your historical data excludes certain populations, excludes certain possible outcomes, um, then any answer it provides will reflect that exclusion, and will be kind of biased towards other type population types or other types of outcomes, which may not be desirable. And so there's a lot of work that you need to be doing to making sure that you are not falling afoul of kind of historical biases that you may be cognizant, or worse, not cognizant of.
So in fact, about 20 or 25% of audience today are coming from research background. I think there are exactly a number of things that can be further improved, further studied, that we can be part of this development process. So the biases, and you also mentioned a little bit assessment on inclusivity. I think those are also very timely and critical research topics that we are also very cognizant of. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out today. And just lastly, one more question is, we would like to end this talk with a little bit forward-looking note. So tomorrow we will have a session called Magic Wand. So we will be asking everyone in the audience, if you have a magic wand today, what would you like to see? What would you like to change in this the digital agriculture ecosystem in the context of AI and DPI. And you must be also thinking about this. You have been researching in this sector and this area for so long, talking with all the government. If you have one bold move, a bold idea without research, having limitation on resources or any kind of frictions, if you have a magic wand, what do you recommend? What do you like to see in this government or implementers working in AI and DPI?
Hey man, I have very boring magic wands. I think a lot of time people want to do something that's kind of really, kind of at the very frontier. But actually, I think a lot of our problems are really kind of boring, simple problems that require a lot of political will to shift kind of basic things. And so one example for me is like, um, I would love for us to have better standards around something as simple as farmer registries. Like right now, like most governments are collecting this data in different formats, using different metadata, and as a result, it's harder for us to kind of create the collective learnings by looking across data across much larger geographies, because the data is actually different in each one of those, and so it becomes harder to kind of be able to connect those data sets and draw larger lessons. And so for me, just like the basic building blocks of good data governance, which I think DPI enhances, and therefore DPI can help with AI, getting that right is just so important. And it's such a basic and simple thing, but it's the kind of boring thing that people don't want to pay attention to as they think about kind of more exciting things in the AI space.
Yeah, but actually not boring at all. I mean, that's truly also exciting. There are some exciting innovations around the farmer registry and universal ID. So yeah, I fully hear you, and that's also fascinating area we can bring together. I think some of the audience in the room also have similar passion, or trying to implement something similar, or want the government to implement something similar as a foundation DPI layer. So no, that idea is well heard, and I'm pretty sure we will have more in-depth discussion around this tomorrow. So
Thank you.
with that, yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us today. And yeah, as I said in the beginning, so your work really gave us powerful lens for thinking about how we design this the DPI and AI ecosystem in agriculture food value chain smarter and also fairer and more inclusive. So to everyone here, so let's keep this conversation going in the working group and innovation jam tomorrow and throughout the networking event for next 2 days. So thanks so much for sharing this insight, David, and we will continue our session together. Thank you.
Thank you.